You guys might have seen that I recently made a video testing out the $5 per month unlimited plan for the Starlink Mini. You guys seem to really like that video, but one thing I didn't test was if you can game on this 0.5 megabyte per second unlimited $5 per month Starlink Mini plan. And that is exactly what we're going to cover in this video. Let's start with a control. So this right here is my home Wi-Fi setup. On the top left of the screen, I have the frames per second, and the top right is the connection data, mostly focusing on the ping here. In between these two bits of data, we can see if any interruptions, lags are from dropping frames or the connection. And I do quickly want to acknowledge the computer that I'm using, because it's the Surface Pro 11 with the Snapdragon X Elite, which is an ARM-based chip. And if you guys want to see an updated video on the current state of gaming on ARM, let me know, subscribe, leave a like, because it feels like a lot has changed recently. For this test, we're running Counter-Strike 2, and you can see that it runs extremely well on this device. The FPS in the top left is hovering around 80 frames per second, and crucial to this experiment is that the consistency here in the frames is also pretty high. I don't think we ever experienced any chugging or lagging due to the performance. And in the top right is my ping, which is about 12 to 13 milliseconds on my home Wi-Fi connection. Now, I will say my home Wi-Fi is only around 50 megabytes per second, but this is more than adequate to provide an extremely viable gaming connection. So I went ahead and deployed my Starlink Mini and my computer, and I jumped into the game trying my best to mimic the previous conditions. One big difference, however, is that the laptop is no longer plugged into a power supply. But again, this is not a normal laptop, and Snapdragon devices like this do not have a performance difference when they're plugged in versus unplugged. Now, getting back to the actual game, the first thing I noticed here is that the time it takes to find a game, load into the map, all of that was pretty much identical to my home Wi-Fi connection. And that itself is a pretty big deal. I was expecting to wait for like 10 full minutes to find a match, but that was not the case. And once we got into the game, you can see that the frame rates here are actually a little bit higher. And I think this is due to being outside in rather cold conditions, which helped to improve the cooling of the system, ultimately giving me a slight frame boost. But focusing on the connection, my ping was way better than I initially anticipated, hovering around 30 to 40 milliseconds, which is pretty similar to most people's home Wi-Fi connection. And my theory here is that the bandwidth of Starlink on this plan isn't negatively affected by the artificially capped download speeds, because normally Starlink has really exceptional bandwidth, and I don't think that's being negatively affected by the speed cap here. And that's a big difference from real, actual slow internet, which on top of having slow download speeds, also usually has bandwidth issues and limitations. But unfortunately, even though we had plenty of bandwidth and a completely reasonable ping, it appears that the 0.5 megabyte per second download speed wasn't enough for online gaming. I was able to occasionally connect bullets and get a frag, but for the most part it was pretty laggy. When I was just moving around and switching guns, it was pretty smooth, but I think the issue here is the constant incoming data updating the real-time position of all the players. And with the speed of only 0.5 megabyte per second, it wasn't quite enough to keep the player movements in real time, resulting in that skipping and lagging of real-time player positions. So like I said, in my opinion, that makes this pretty much unusable for online gaming. But I will say, it feels like this plan is almost good enough for gaming. And if Starlink ever updates this plan in the future, or comes out with a new budget plan that's somewhere in the range of 5 megabytes per second, then based off of this, there's a pretty good chance that that then may be good enough for gaming on a budget. And again, a big reason for that is because the bandwidth here is not being limited, resulting in better connection, responsiveness, ping than the pure download speeds might indicate. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.